Okay, I am reading this from mentalillnesspolicy.org and under the fair use. Scientology, CCHR, and serious mental illness, New York Times. A major impediment to reforming care for the seriously mentally ill is Scientology, which according to their website is a religion. Scientology does not believe in the medical model of mental illness, as is their right. They founded Citizens Commission on Human Rights, CCHR, to end the medical model. CCHR believes psychiatry is torture, and psychiatrists caused 9-1 and 1. They are working to eliminate non-Scientologists' rights to take medication or electroconvulsive therapy. Following is an article from the New York Times on the impact on one person. Scientology faces glare of scrutiny after Florida parishioner's death by Douglas Frant. New York Times, December 1st, 1997. Clearwater, Florida. Late on a November afternoon 2 years ago, a 36-year-old Scientologist named Lisa McPherson was involved in a minor traffic accident. She was not injured, but she inexplicably stripped off her clothes and began to walk naked down the street. A paramedic rushed her into an ambulance and asked why she had taken off her clothes. Miss McPherson replied, "I wanted help. I wanted help." I'm going to say that again. I wanted help, troll. I wanted help. She was taken to a nearby hospital for a psychiatric examination, but several Scientologists arrived and explained that their religion opposes psychiatry. Miss McPherson asked to leave and against medical advice. She was released into the care of Scientologists. 17 days later, after being kept under 24-hour watch at a Scientology-owned hotel in downtown Clearwater, it's the Fort Harrison Hotel, Miss McPherson was dead. Apparently, Clearwater PD they couldn't figure that one out. By church accounts, she had spit out food, banged violently on the walls of her room, and hallucinated. The county medical examiner said Miss McPherson was deprived of water for at least her last 5 to 10 days and died of a blood clot brought on by severe dehydration. Severe dehydration. IV fluids would have helped that. I'm not a medical professional, and I know that one. It's not hard to learn how to do that. Just get a medical professional to teach you. An examination of Miss McPherson's life and death, including a review of church records and other documents from a lawsuit filed by her family, offers an unusually rich look into the world of one Scientologist. It shows how virtually every aspect of her life, work, friendships, relationships with family members, even choices of vacation spots, was influenced by the church. It also shows the financial demands Scientology places on its members. Miss McPherson worked at a business owned by Scientologists and spent so much of her salary on church courses that she had to borrow from her employer to keep up with her studies in church doctrine. She was able to deduct the payments for those courses from her taxes, but when she got a refund from the federal government, it was turned immediately over to her employers to pay for more courses. The financial pressure on members of Scientology is one reason critics worldwide describe the church as a cult and money machine intended to bilk the faithful who pay large sums to undergo counseling sessions. This is the primary reason given by the German government for refusing to recognize Scientology as a religion. refusing to recognize Scientology as a religion. Troll. Beyond the financial issues, the circumstances surrounding Miss McPherson's death raise questions about whether the Church's handling of her medical treatment, particularly its failure, for philosophical reasons, to provide psychiatric care, contributed to her death. The commitment, strong beliefs, and large donations. Certainly in her progression within Scientology, Miss McPherson gave more to her church than average Americans donate to traditional churches. In the last 2 years of her life, she paid $97,000 for Scientology courses with names like Wall of Fire and New Life Rundown. The payments amounted to 40% of her earnings. In keeping with the Church's belief that people live many lifetimes, Ms. McPherson signed what Scientology calls a billion-year contract. As a member of the Sea organization, Scientology's elite staff group, please. Although she later resigned from the staff, she remained a devout Scientologist. Devout, can you imagine? Trying to push this off. And when her life began to fall apart, she turned her back on conventional medical treatment and sought refuge in Scientology. For members who are deeply involved, Scientology becomes a totalistic institution, says Stephen A. Kent. Go check out a lot of his work. He's got some good stuff. A sociologist at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta, who has studied the organization. It provides them with everything from occupation, pseudo-medical treatments, entertainment, and a justice system to an overarching purpose for their lives. That's where they're harvesting energy, you guys. You don't need anything to tell you what your purpose is. Scientology founder Hubbard said people were immortal spirits who have lived through many lifetimes and accumulated traumatic memories that are obstacles to achieving their full potential. Adherents believe that those afflictions can be eliminated through a series of counseling courses known as auditing. Most of the courses involve detailed questioning about Scientology and the members' lives by church ministers who monitor responses with a crude lie detector they call an e-meter. The result, after years of courses, is an individual who is clear of problems. This includes children, you guys. Miss McPherson, who was so successful that she earned commissions of $136,812, despite her income, Miss McPherson lived frugally. She shared a $695 a month apartment with a roommate and bought little jewelry or furniture. But no expense was spared when it came to Scientology. Church financial records turned over in the family's lawsuit show that Miss McPherson paid $55,767 for Scientology courses in 1994 and contributed $41,924 in 1995. The collapse. A roller coaster barrels downward. The final year of Miss McPherson's life was tumultuous. In Scientology terms, she was roller coastering, meaning she was going through emotional ups and downs. In June 1995, she apparently suffered a mental breakdown. A report prepared after her death by the church said she caved in and went into a psychotic break. I bet they didn't tell the public what they usually do with people that go through psychotic breaks. Instead of getting them mental health help, they put them through the introspection rundown. It's public record. Her commissions at work remain low, however, and she borrowed from her employers to pay for the courses. AMC payroll records show that Miss McPherson borrowed more than $33,000 in 1995 and paid the same amounts to the church for courses. By September, she apparently had recovered enough to reach the coveted status of clear. Photographs of her award ceremony show Miss McPherson beaming, and she wrote passionate letters of thanks to fellow Scientologists. But the roller coaster was headed down. In late October, she was on the telephone to her mother, sobbing that she had let down her group at work, her aunt said. Were they making her write KRs and making amends? Is that what they were doing to her? Sciento? 2 weeks later, she telephoned Kelly Davis, a childhood friend in Dallas, and said she was going home to stay. By Christmas at the latest, Miss Davis said. In a sworn deposition, Miss Davis said she interpreted Miss McPherson's remarks to mean that she was leaving the church. Her aunt, Mrs. Liebrick, said the family also thought that Miss McPherson was considering leaving Scientology. Church lawyers said she had no intention of leaving the fold. You know, isn't lying under oath a crime? It's free to ask questions. She never went home. About dusk on November 18th, 1995, Miss McPherson was driving her 1993 Jeep in Clearwater when she struck a boat being towed by a car that had stopped for an earlier accident. Damage was minor, and paramedics at the scene examined Miss McPherson and found her uninjured. Then she took off her clothes and began walking along the street. Bonita Ann Portolano, one of the paramedics, helped her into the ambulance. Mrs. Portolano said Miss McPherson was muttering about not needing a body to live and said she had taken off her clothes because she wanted help. Imagine the desperation. And also imagine how many of these Scientologists that were begging for help, to include children that ran away, and the Clearwater PD or the LAPD just deliver them straight back to their captors. Isn't that aiding and abetting in crimes? In a later deposition, Mrs. Portolano estimated that Miss McPherson weighed 155 pounds. She was a very healthy person, just voluptuous, the paramedic said. After Miss McPherson was taken to a nearby hospital, 7 Scientologists, including some senior officials, arrived. Was Rinder there and Rathburn? Don't you guys wonder? Do tell. Who are these senior officials, these prestigious executives? Was Rinder there? Word on the curb is that Rinder and Rathburn were there. That was the word on the curb. But yet, Rinder never served a day in his life. She refused psychiatric treatment. Right, sure she did. And said she would not harm herself, and she was released into the care of her fellow parishioners. Although Scientologists do accept medical treatment, Miss McPherson was following the church's conviction in rejecting psychiatric care. Church literature says psychiatrists were paid by the government to denounce Scientology as a hoax when Hubbard, a successful science fiction writer, began the church in 1954. In 1969, the church created the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, which was supposed to expose and eradicate human rights abuses by psychiatry. Tell me that's not an inversion, you guys. In January 1974, Hubbard wrote a paper describing what he called, there we go, the introspection rundown for treating people who suffer mental breakdowns. He wrote that for himself, right? He said that the technique possibly ranks with the major discoveries of the 20th century. All self-proclamations. Governments were fine with that, weren't they? And that it would do away with psychiatry. The first step is to isolate the people who suffer breakdowns, to protect them and others. No medical evidence to back any of this up. No studies, no anything. No one is allowed to speak to the people or within their hearing except to deliver lessons supposed to locate and correct the problems that led to the breakdown. Apparently, Hubbard never got this. But then again, when he had passed away, There were various psychiatric medications found in his bloodstream. So apparently the introspection rundown did not work for Hubbard. The death from a hotel room, hotel of darkness, to an emergency room. Lisa McPherson spent her final days in isolation in room 174 at the rear of the Fort Harrison Hotel. You wonder if there were any 911 calls made? A church lawyer initially described her stay to a local reporter as restful. Restful, you guys. Yeah, restful, all right. It was restful. And he said she had received no medical treatment. Listen to this, you guys. But 33 pages, you guys. Not one, not two. 33. They sure love that number, don't they? Pages of, it is a master number, just so you know, of handwritten logs tell a far bleaker tale. The logs were released this summer on orders from the judge hearing the McPherson estate's lawsuit. Scientology staff members who monitored Miss McPherson, the ones with no names, 24 hours a day, kept them, and the notes depict a woman whose mental condition deteriorated rapidly and whose health began to fail well before she died. Isn't that called false imprisonment? Not when it comes to Scientology, though. 2 days into her stay, the logs recount Miss McPherson spitting out food and vomiting. The 4th day, she was ashen-faced and feverish. She was often described as violent, striking her attendants and banging on the walls. She wanted to leave. She soiled herself and hallucinated that she was Hubbard. If she soiled herself, that's also from severe malnutrition. One of the logs indicated that she tried to leave the room. There you go, you guys. False imprisonment. But church lawyers, the ones with no names, say that she was not restrained. Right, of course not. Here you go, you guys. Rather, Miss Vaughn, one of the lawyers, said she was incapable of caring for herself. But that's why she was still in the room, right? I'm reading this under the fair use. Among those who cared for her was Dr. Janice Johnson, a member of the church medical office. Are they going to explain that they have no medical credentials whatsoever? Are they going to give her strawberries or blueberries to heal her? Dr. Johnson is a physician who is not licensed to practice in Florida. Of course not. And had agreed to restrictions on her medical license in Arizona in 1993 after 2 hospitals questioned her use of prescription drugs. On December 1st, 1995, Dr. Johnson administered a prescription sleep medication to Miss McPherson and left written instructions that Miss McPherson be given 2 liters of liquid when she awoke. And I'm not a medical doctor, but obviously she needed to be in a hospital. I believe she had physical ailments and mental health issues. Common sense, IV fluids first, right? Unreal. Ken Dondar, the lawyer for the McPherson estate, said 2 liters was a substantial amount of liquid and that the instructions were an indication that Miss McPherson was in need of immediate medical attention. Yeah. They should have taken her to the hospital immediately, Dondar said. Instead, they kept her there until she died. Prisoner. Doesn't it remind you guys of all those cages that allegedly Diddy had in the basement of his mansion? And just so you know, he's not the only one. Go check out Conquered Soul. Notes for December 2nd and 3rd indicate that Miss McPherson drank some liquids and was coherent at times. Scientology officials said they could not find the notes for the final 2 days of her life. Huh. Isn't that destruction of evidence as well as aiding and abetting in crimes? There's more charges that could be applied, but apparently nobody knows how to do that. On the evening of December 5th, Miss McPherson's condition had deteriorated to the point that Dr. Johnson sought outside help. Records indicate that about 7 p.m. she telephoned a Scientologist, another one with no name, who was working as an emergency room doctor at a hospital in Newport Richey, Florida. Anyone know which doctor that was? 45 minutes from Clearwater, Dr. Johnson and another church staff member, the staff member with no name, took Miss McPherson to the Newport Richey Hospital, passing 4 other hospitals. Don't you guys wonder if Rinder or Rathburn were in those cars? Or following behind the car with McPherson? Because Rinder sure was tight-lipped about that. And there's some real creepy rumors about Rathburn out here. Rumors. Word on the curb. When they arrived, hospital records and court files show Miss McPherson had no pulse. She was pronounced dead after 20 minutes of resuscitation efforts. You see, this was cover-up. They didn't care about this poor young lady. She was thin, she was unkempt, dirty, just not taken care of, said the emergency room nurse, who helped to try to revive Miss McPherson. Imagine how traumatic that was for everyone there. Because it was an unattended death, an autopsy was done. It found that Miss McPherson, who was 5'9", weighed 108 pounds. That's severely underweight. And that she had scratches and bruises on her hands and arms. They weren't going to let her go. How much do you guys bet these bruises on her hands and arms were to hold her down? Don't you guys wonder who was holding her down and why nobody ever paid or went to jail for it? I do. The cause of death was listed as thromboembolism. That was the second cause of death, by the way, you guys. Go look into that coroner. The first initial coroner, I can't think of her name. Go look and see all what happened with her. Severe dehydration and bed rest caused the clot, the autopsy said. A police inquiry was started as a matter of routine. Oh, we could count on that one. The aftermath. An investigation expands and a lawsuit follows. In January, Dr. Joan Wood, the county medical examiner, appeared on Inside Edition, the syndicated television program. Wood said the autopsy indicated that Miss McPherson had gone without water for at least 5 to 10 days and possibly longer. She said Miss McPherson had been unconscious for the last 24 to 48 hours of her life and that the scratches on her arms were cockroach bites. They got to her, you guys. Go look into all that, guys. Go look into it. This is the most severe case of dehydration I've ever seen, she said. Well, a lot of people that came out of that, especially the children of Scientology that came from the Hotels of Darkness. They've talked about the cockroaches over and over. The church hired its own medical experts. You guys know the medical experts with no medical qualifications. Its lead lawyers in the criminal case, Ms. Vaughn and Lee Fugate, said in an interview that those experts disagreed with Dr. Wood. Because they know more, right? Who are these medical experts? And how much did they get paid? The lawyers declined to identify their experts. Of course they did. Of course they did. New York Times, December 1st, 1997. So I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day. Copyright disclaimer under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.